I want to talk a little bit about PSA today and the new comic book grading service that's coming to market over the next couple of weeks. Of course, they just announced a new pricing structure for comics being submitted, and I do believe they're taking submissions at San Diego Comic-Con this year as well. But we got that pricing structure, and there are some people losing their minds on Instagram and especially on YouTube. A couple of big YouTubers have already gone off about the pricing structure. But I want to talk a little about, maybe give you a little bit of an inkling of why PSA is pricing their service kind of similar to CGC. Stay tuned in the podcast for that one. But let's start off with who PSA is. Don't forget, if you're not a card collector, when PSA came to the market, they were not the top dog. Took them a while to take that top spot. It did take some faltering on part of the other companies within the card space for them to do so. But regardless, in 2020, I remember them stopping, submissions. They were not taking any more card submissions because they were inundated with work. I do know it was the pandemic. People are sending a lot of stuff in. But keep in mind, they were the top dog at that point. And don't also forget this, that their cards, their graded cards, fetch the most. They are the top dog. They command the most for what they are. Okay? And with that said, I'm not saying they're going to come right out of the gate and take over CGC and get the same kind of value that CGC gets. But I do understand, and I hope you guys understand out there, that PSA is not looking to come here and dominate on the get-go. Okay? It's going to take them a while to find themselves, find what's right for them as a company in the comic book grading space, and go from there. They need to get the collector's trust. Of course, that is the most thing. We all know CGC has faltered many a time over the past couple of years. We're not going to get into that in today's video, but keep that in the back of your head, okay? Because that is why PSA is here. Now, with that said, I want to talk a little bit about the pricing structure because it is eerily similar to CGC. So we're going to start with the moderns, okay? Very, very similar. It's a 1975 plus. The max insured value is $400, just like CGC. 20 business day turnaround time for $26. That's the introductory rate. After that, it's going to $30. If you compare that to CGC, without a membership, it's $27. So $3 difference down the line, but right now you're saving about $2, okay? They call a Modern Plus, which is basically just a fast track that CGC does. You're going to add that about $15 on top of that. You're going to pay $40 now and $45 later, and it's only going to cut it by 8 business days. So to me, right now, it's really not worth it to do that, okay? CGC, again, I think you're paying an extra $15 for that service as well. It does make sense to do it with CGC because the turnaround times are a lot greater as we speak. Now, let's get into vintage, where a lot of vintage collectors collect Silver Age, Golden Age, stuff like that. The vintage, the max insured value is $400 the same, but it turns to 30 business days for $40. Does that make any sense? Why, if it's something is valued at $400, whether it's over 1975 or under, that there's a longer turnaround time? To me, that never made sense from either company, but I digress, guys. There's a Vintage Plus, which again adds about $15 from $40 to $55. So again, very on par with CGC as well. We're going to go to books that are valued at $1,500 or more. Okay, so that differs from CGC is that CGC has a high value tier of $1,000 for $95 per book. The current turnaround time is 10 days, believe it or not. Okay, so PSA is offering a $1,500 max insured value. Again, same 10 business day turnaround time for $95 as well. We'll head up to $100 down the line. That $95 is an introductory rate. Okay, so Express is the last tier, which CGC does not offer anymore. Anything over $1,000 is 4% commission, where the Express is $2,500 max insured value, 10 business days, but the pricing is $119 per book. Okay, so that is where you may think it's different, but if you do the 4% on 2,500, it's just over $100. So they're quite similar in price, and people are up in arms and asking, well, why would PSA be similar to CGC in pricing? Well, let's talk about it, okay? Let's compare PSA to CBCS, and we don't want to do that. PSA does not want that comparison. I can 100% guarantee that. But CBCS is a cheaper version of CGC. I shouldn't even say it like that. It's a more inexpensive version of CGC. And with that said, how many people out there use CBCS? A minute fraction of people who submit books. So does PSA want to compare themselves to CBCS, who is a cheaper alternative to CGC, or do they want to say they're on par with the leading grading company out there for comics? I think they want to say we're right on par with CGC because our product and our grading and what we're offering as a service is on par with CGC, if not better. That's the whole reason why I think PSA stuck to this pricing tier that they've gone ahead and put out. Because if you're going to offer a cheaper alternative, people are going to take that as a perception that you're offering a cheaper service. And that's never what you want to portray as a company. Okay, I can tell you that from someone who's, 25 years in business, working for a large corporation, but also working for myself. Perception is everything. If you guys are an Apple fan, look at Steve Jobs and look at what he thought other people's perception of his company, how important that was. And PSA is doing the exact same thing. So if you're going to offer your services for a cheaper price, people are going to look at that and say, you know what? Maybe the services they're offering are less quality than that of CGC's. I'm not saying it is, but perception is everything when we're talking about business. So with that said, there is no difference in pricing between PSA and CGC, really. A couple of dollars here or there. I don't really care. I'm not a volume submitter, though. I've told you guys this a million times, and I have never had an issue with CGC. I'm not going to lie. We may have had a difference in opinion about, a grade maybe by a 0.5, maybe 1 point, but it's never egregious. I've never had that experience, but I'm not a volume submitter. Now, the people out there submitting, 9.8 pre-screens and 50 books a month and a million submissions during the year, you may have a different opinion. But for me, being a not a volume submitter, being on par price-wise is not a big deal. I'm seeing a lot of people in the community lose their freaking shit, saying it was such a dumb move by PSA to go ahead and be on par price-wise. But guys, why would you want to offer your services for a cheaper rate? You're basically devaluing your own service. You guys have to understand that. Now, I wish CGC didn't raise their prices 3 times last year, because if they didn't, we might not have PSA right now. They might not be inclined to get into the space, because we all know that comic book market is not flourishing right now. I think the best deals out there are the deals that the dealers are getting from people selling their collections. Don't forget that, okay? And I do think dealers submit books, don't get me wrong, but there's still a ton of people out there saying to me that only raw books are selling right now. Graded books are still lacking and not leading the way for comic sales. People want to buy raw, they want to submit themselves and try to get equity in their comics. I've been saying this for the better part of 2 years. People can kill PSA in the label. That is a whole different story, okay? I am not, opposed to the new PSA label. I think the original label we got earlier in the year definitely needed some work, but what they've come up with, and I know everybody hates the red, but they were never going to move off of that red. They are known for that, okay? But do you want something that looks good, or do you want the right grade? Do you want no issues in the inner well? Do you want no issues overall getting a book back to you? And I'm not saying that's not going to happen with PSA, because it's all relative, right? If CGC is having these issues, we're going to see if PSA has the same issues or different issues. We all know CBCS had a few issues as well. So it's just the space in general, the service they're offering, they're always susceptible to different things. Now, again, can PSA kind of capitalize on some of CGC's mistakes? I don't know. There's so many collectors out there who are just so stubborn about grading their books. I said it myself. I'm not a huge submitter. I don't submit a lot of books. When I first got back into collecting, I was submitting more books. I was buying more books. But now that I'm not buying books anymore as much, I do buy a few here or there, I see no reason to spend extra cash submitting books. I've heard a couple of people say well, why aren't they offering bigger deals so people could ship their books in to kind of try their service out? Again, I'm going to say to you guys, why should they devalue their service by offering a cheaper price, okay? I do believe with cards, PSA will run some specials now and then, so they may do the same with comics, but I want any of the comic guys, or the card guys out there, I should say, to kind of correct me down below who submit to PSA continuously. Do you guys get deals once in a while? I do see some stuff out there that I get once in a while, because I have submitted before, but it's been quite a bit about some deals, some offers once in a blue moon. But I'm trying to give you guys a little bit of some information of how businesses think and why the pricing structure is the way it is. So how about this? Let's talk about grading itself, okay? You guys know, if you watch me on Mighty Comics Collectibles or you're watching the Rewind here, that I have a ton of raw books. I have an entire Amazing Spider-Man collection, nearly 1 through 301. I think I have like 5 graded books in that whole run. The rest are all raw. Even the big keys, 2 through whatever is all raw. And I refuse to get it graded because the amount of money it's going to cost me to grade those books would be astronomical. And why do I want to go ahead and spend that type of money on books I'm just going to keep on my shelf? Now, with that said, I do understand that if I'm trying to sell this collection at some point, that a lot of people want to buy, these graded books. You're going to get the most bang for your buck and the most value out of the collection by selling them graded already. But with that said, my plan is to kind of pass these comics on to my children. I've sold most of what I'm going to sell in my collection. I do have some stuff I probably will sell before I pass. At least that's the goal. But I don't understand why a lot of people out there grade their books. All grading does is assign a value to a comic. Now, there are people out there that grade 9.8 modern books just to kind of resell. And I get that. I'm never going to say to someone, you shouldn't make money. You shouldn't, go after that almighty dollar, because I'm a hooker just like everybody else when it comes to that stuff. But with that said, if you're a collector and you like collecting books, if you like collecting slabs, I think it's awesome. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. It's just you have to be mindful of the cost, okay? And I'm at a point where in my collecting journey where I don't want to spend that money anymore, but there are plenty of people out there who still do it, and I think that's great. So I think you need to look at yourself and say, how many books am I submitting a month? How many books am I submitting a year? And then go from there. I think everybody should try PSA out and see how they do, right? What the turnaround times are, if they like the cases, the label, how the book looks inside the case itself, because that all plays a factor. But at the end of the day, you're assigning a value to that comic book, and that is the only reason to get the book graded. And that kind of brings me to my final point. What's more important to you, having a slab on your wall and value on your wall, or money in your pocket? Okay? If you're a collector, collect because you love the genre, because that's why I collect. But if you do want to spend the money on grading, do it wisely. We all know the main reason people use CGC is because their comics sell for the most. So I'm going to ask you this. If PSA comics start selling for equal value as CGC comics, will you use them to grade your books? Drop me down in the comments what your answer is, okay? Because if the answer is no, I want you to tell me why. If the values are the same, why won't you use PSA? Because CGC is here first? I think that's fine. Like I said before, I have nothing against CGC. I've never had an issue with them. It's just more about pricing. If it was 3 years ago and the pricing structure was what it was then that it is now, I'd be still probably submitting books, because the amount of money has nearly doubled or even tripled from when I first got back into collecting till now. So that's the reason why I stopped submitting books, because it's just too freaking expensive, and I just don't think it's really necessary for something that I'm not really going to sell. So I want to hear from everyone out there in the comments of what you think. Are you going to give PSA a chance? Are you only sticking with CGC? And I really didn't want to touch on any of the other grading companies in this podcast today. And it's a short one, but I had to get this off my chest. You can't fault a company for not wanting to devalue their service. And that's what this comes down to. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you'd like to become a sponsor here on the Mighty Rewind Podcast, make sure you reach out at the Mighty Rewind Podcast at gmail.com.